This might look like a small change, but it could mean a lot more than people realize. Because Shedeur Sanders just made an update that instantly caught everyone's attention. He's officially switching to number 2. Now on the surface, it's just a jersey number. Players change numbers all the time. But this one, it feels different. Because the reaction wasn't normal. Fans noticed. The team noticed. Even the comments started hinting at something bigger. And that's where things get interesting. Because in football, numbers aren't just numbers. They represent identity, confidence, sometimes even a new chapter. So when a player makes a move like this, especially at this moment, it raises a bigger question. Is this just a personal preference? Or is this a signal that something is about to change? At first glance, it seems simple. A player changes his number. No big deal. But when Shedeur Sanders announced he's switching to number 2, the reaction was immediate and very different from what you'd expect. Because this didn't feel like a routine update. It felt like a moment. Fans instantly started talking about it. Comment sections lit up. People weren't just reacting, they were reading into it, trying to understand what it means. And that's where things start to shift. Because the Browns themselves responded. A simple yes, sir. Short, clean, but powerful. Because teams don't always engage like that unless they recognize the significance of what just happened. And that's what makes this feel bigger than just a number. Because if this was purely random, if this was just a cosmetic change, it wouldn't carry this kind of energy. But it does. And that tells you something. Because in football, numbers carry weight. They're tied to identity, to history, to how players see themselves on the field. And for someone like Shedeur, that matters even more. Because number 2 isn't new to him. It's familiar. It's part of his journey. It's what he's worn before. Which means this isn't just a switch. It's a return, a reset, a move back to something that represents who he really is as a player. And when athletes do that, it's usually intentional, because they're trying to tap into something. Confidence, comfort, a certain mindset. And that's where this becomes interesting, because the timing isn't random either. This is happening right before things get serious, right before competition ramps up, right before roles start getting defined. Which means this isn't just about identity. It's about preparation. Because when a player makes a move like this right before a key moment, it often signals something internal. A shift, a focus, a belief that they're ready for what's coming next. And that's exactly how fans are reading it. Not as a number chain, but as a message. A quiet one, but a clear one. Because whether it was intended or not, it feels like a statement. And once that feeling starts spreading, it becomes bigger than the action itself. But here, where it gets even more interesting. Because the reaction from fans wasn't just excitement. It was something else entirely. And this is where things start to get really interesting. Because the reaction wasn't just excitement. It was belief. The moment Shedeur Sanders revealed the number change, fans didn't treat it like a simple update. They treated it like a signal. Almost instantly, the conversation shifted. People weren't asking, why did he change his number? They were asking, does this mean he's QB1? And that tells you everything. Because fans don't jump to that conclusion unless there's already momentum building. Unless there's already a feeling that something is changing behind the scenes. And this move just added fuel to that fire. Because in sports, perception matters. And right now, the perception around Shedeur is growing fast. Confidence, control, presence, all of it is starting to show. And when fans see that, they connect dots, even if those dots aren't officially confirmed. Now, to be clear, there's been no official announcement. No one has named him the starter. No coach has stepped out and said it directly. But that's not stopping the conversation. Because sometimes the strongest signals aren't verbal. They're visual, symbolic, subtle, and that's exactly what this feels like. Because changing to number 2, his original number, feels like stepping into something. Like stepping into a role. A version of himself that people already associate with confidence and control. And fans recognize that. They remember what that number represents. They associate it with his past success, his identity, his swagger. So when they see it come back, they don't just see a jersey. They see a version of Shedeur that feels ready. Ready to lead. Ready to take over. And that's why the reaction is so strong. Because this isn't just about what he did. It's about what it represents. Now add in the timing. Right before the season. Right before camp. Right before real competition begins. And it starts to feel intentional. Like a message without words. A way of saying, I'm here. I'm ready. I'm not waiting. But here, the key thing to understand. This is still perception, not confirmation. And that's where the line gets blurred. Because while fans are reading this as a QB1 signal, the reality inside the building might still be different. And that tension between perception and reality, that's what makes this situation so interesting. Because once those two things start getting closer, that's when everything changes. But here, where it goes even deeper. Because this isn't just about fans guessing. There's meaning behind the number itself. And this is where it goes beyond hype. Because the number itself actually means something. This isn't just a random pick. This isn't just whatever was available. For Shedeur Sanders, number 2 is part of his identity. It's what he wore earlier in his career. It's tied to his rise, his confidence, his style of play. So when he goes back to it, that's not a small decision. That's intentional. Because athletes don't just change numbers for no reason. Especially quarterbacks. Everything they do is calculated. Everything connects to mindset. And in this case, number 2 feels like a reset. A return to who he was before all the noise. Before the pressure. Before the expectations that come with the NFL. And that's powerful. Because sometimes, going back to something familiar is how players move forward. Now here, where it gets even deeper. In the clip, there's discussion around what this number represents. Almost like a rebirth. A new version of himself. Not starting over, but evolving. Because the idea isn't that he's the same player he was before. It's that he's bringing that original identity into a new stage, a higher level, a bigger moment. And that's what makes this interesting. Because now the number becomes symbolic. It's not just what's on the jersey. It's what it represents mentally. Confidence, clarity, ownership. And when a quarterback carries that, it changes how they play. Because football, especially at that position, is as much mental as it is physical. If you feel like yourself, if you feel locked in, if you feel in control, you play differently. You lead differently. And that's what this looks like. A player stepping into a version of himself that feels complete. But here, where the timing makes it even more important, because this isn't happening in the middle of the season. It's not happening randomly. It's happening right before everything matters. Right before competition. Right before roles get defined. Which means this rebirth isn't just symbolic. It's strategic. Because now he's entering that moment as the version of himself he trusts the most. And that could make all the difference. But here's the part that really raises questions. Because when you combine meaning with timing, it stops feeling like coincidence and starts feeling like something planned. And this is where everything starts to feel intentional. Because if this was just a personal decision, why now? Why right before everything ramps up? Why right before training camp, competition, and real evaluation begins? That's the part that makes people pause. Because timing in football is rarely random, especially when it comes to quarterbacks, and especially when it comes to someone like Shedeur Sanders. Because every move at this stage matters. Every detail is part of preparation. So when he switches back to number 2 at this exact moment, it starts to feel like more than preference. It feels like positioning. Because think about it. This is the final stretch before everything becomes real. Practices turn competitive. Reps start getting tracked. Coaches start making real evaluations. And players start separating themselves. So stepping into that moment with a new, or in this case, familiar identity, that's not accidental. That's strategic. Because it sets the tone. It sends a message, internally and externally, without needing to say a word. And that's why people are reading into it. Because moves like this often come right before a shift. Right before something changes. Right before a player steps into a bigger role. Now, to be fair, there's no official confirmation of anything. No coach has come out and said, this means he's the guy. No insider report has tied the number change directly to his role. So we have to be clear. This is perception, not proof. But at the same time, perception doesn't come from nothing. There's usually a reason it starts building. A feeling, a pattern, something that makes people connect the dots. And in this case, the dots are lining up. Because you have the timing. You have the confidence behind the move. You have the reaction from fans and the team. And when all those things happen together, it creates momentum. And momentum matters. Because once a player builds that kind of energy around them, it starts influencing how people see them, how they talk about them, how they expect them to perform. And sometimes, that energy carries over onto the field. But here, where it gets even more interesting. Because while everyone is focused on what this means symbolically, there's another layer to this that people aren't talking about enough. And it might be just as important. And this is where the story takes a completely different turn. Because while everyone is focused on the symbolism, there's another layer to this that's just as real. The business side. Because when Shedeur Sanders switches to number 2, it doesn't just impact the field. It impacts everything around it. Jerseys, merchandise, fan engagement. And that matters more than people think. Because the moment this change was announced, fans immediately started talking about buying the new jersey. Not later. Not maybe. Right now. That kind of reaction isn't normal. That's momentum. Because in the NFL, jersey numbers aren't just identity. They're brand. And Shedeur already has that presence. He already has that following. So when he brings back a number that's tied to his original identity, It creates a surge, a feeling of something new, but also familiar. And that's powerful from a marketing perspective, because now you're not just selling a player, you're selling a moment, a transition, a new chapter that fans want to be part of. And companies understand that. Brands understand that. Because timing like this, right before the season, that's when hype is at its peak. That's when fans are most engaged. That's when they're ready to invest emotionally and financially. And this fits perfectly into that window. Now, to be clear, this doesn't mean the decision was made for business reasons, but it does mean the impact goes beyond football. Because when a player's identity aligns with hype, and hype aligns with timing, everything amplifies. And that's exactly what's happening here. Because now, this isn't just about a jersey number chain. It's about visibility, attention, energy. And once that builds, it starts feeding into the narrative. Because the more people talk about it, the more it feels important. The more it feels like something bigger is happening. And that circles back to the original question. Is this just a number chain? Or is this part of a larger shift? Because when you combine symbolism, timing, and now business impact, it stops feeling random. It starts feeling like momentum. And momentum in sports, it usually leads somewhere. But here, where it gets even deeper. Because beyond the fans, beyond the hype, there's one place where this kind of move matters the most. Inside the locker room. And this is where things move beyond hype, beyond fans, beyond social media, into the one place that actually matters most. The locker room. Because for players, especially quarterbacks, a number isn't just branding. It's identity. It's presence. It's how you carry yourself every single day. And when Shedeur Sanders switches back to number 2 at this moment, that sends a message. Not a loud one. Not something he has to say out loud, but something teammates can feel. Because in a locker room, everything is observed. Every move, every change, every detail. And when a quarterback makes a decision like this right before competition, it signals confidence. It signals comfort. It signals that he's stepping into something. And teammates pick up on that. Because leadership in football isn't always about speeches. It's about presence. It's about how you show up, how you carry yourself, how you prepare. And small things, like a jersey number, can reflect a bigger mindset. Now think about it from their perspective. They've seen him with number 12. They've seen the transition, the adjustment to a new level. But now, they're seeing him return to something familiar, something tied to his roots. And that can feel like a shift, like he's more settled, more locked in, more himself. And that matters, because players gravitate toward confidence. They trust it. They respond to it, especially when it comes from the quarterback. Now again, this doesn't automatically make him QB1. There's still competition, still evaluation, still reps that need to be earned. But it does change the energy. Because when a quarterback starts moving like he belongs, it's noticed. When he carries himself like he's ready, it's felt. And that can influence more than people think. Because football isn't just about ability. It's about belief. Belief from coaches. Belief from teammates. Belief from the locker room as a whole. And moments like this, even something as simple as a number chain, can contribute to that belief. It can reinforce it. It can build it. And once that starts growing, it becomes harder to ignore. Because now it's not just fans talking. It's not just media speculation. It's internal, subtle, but real. And that's where things start to shift. Because when perception outside starts matching energy inside, that's when momentum becomes something more. But here, the final piece of this entire situation. Because when you step back and look at everything together, the meaning, the timing, the reaction, and the message, it all points toward one bigger question. And now everything comes back to one simple question. Was this just a jersey chain? Or was it something more? Because when you step back and look at the full picture, the meaning behind number 2, the timing of the decision, the reaction from fans, the subtle response from the team, and even the energy it creates inside the locker room, it stops feeling like a small move. It starts feeling like a moment. Because moves like this don't exist in isolation. They connect to something. They build towards something. And in this case, everything seems to be pointing in the same direction. Momentum. Because right now, Shedeur Sanders isn't just changing a number. He's changing perception. He's stepping into a version of himself that feels more defined, more confident, more ready for what's coming next. And people are noticing. Fans are reacting. The conversation is shifting. But here, the key thing to remember. None of this confirms anything. There's still competition, still evaluation, still real football to be played. Nothing has been officially decided. And that's important, because while perception is powerful, reality is what matters. And reality will be decided on the field, through reps, through performance, through who actually earns it when the moment comes. But at the same time, perception often comes first. It builds before the results. It creates the narrative before the outcome is finalized. And sometimes, that narrative ends up becoming reality. That's what makes this so interesting. Because right now, we're in that in-between phase, where nothing is confirmed, but everything feels like it's shifting. And this move, simple as it may seem, is part of that shift. So now the question is whether this number change matters. It's how much it matters. Because if this really is the beginning of something bigger, then we might be looking at the moment where everything started to change. Quietly, without an announcement, without a headline, just one decision. That said more than words ever could.